we have a very interesting conversation. Yeah, recording in progress. So if you're not comfortable to be on the video, you can switch your camera off. Otherwise, we always happy to see your beautiful faces. So yeah, we have a panel talk today. Are your metrics telling the right story? My name is Paulina. I'm gonna be your host for the next 90 minutes together. Can you still see my screen? Okay, you can. Okay, awesome. So together with my beautiful co-hosts, Akris and Marianne, we creating spaces, learning spaces for APAC and Sydney's Hub communities of L&D Shakers, and they are also here today with us. Will be helping you in the chat. And if you're not familiar with L&D Shakers, we are a global community of L&D professionals sharing ideas, challenges, and inspiration. We have local hubs all around the world, and our community is more than 10,000 members, which is insane, but it's also awesome to see people from all different parts of the world sharing the knowledge with one another. We have LinkedIn group and our Slack channel. If you're not there, please join. We will be sharing a QR code in the end of this session. What else? We have no selling space. We are here to share, learn, and connect. All right. Are your metrics telling the right story? So this is a little bit backstory about this event and how it was, how we came up with this idea. So the thing is that I personally transitioned in L&D just a half year ago, and still learning a lot. And one of the things that I noticed at my current organization was that we don't really measure anything except attendance rates. So that actually got me confused a little, but then also curious. And I decided to do my research on metrics. And then I spoke with a few colleagues and other professionals in different sectors, and I realized that this is not just me or our team, and that in fact many other teams also face the same challenge with metrics, depending on each team, but there is always something about the metrics. So then we thought, okay, maybe this is the great opportunity to come together and have a conversation and learn together. And even though we maybe won't have all the answers to all the questions, but at least we'll have a conversation, and maybe eventually we'll move a needle and come up with something great. So this is why we asked our three brilliant speakers. Please welcome them with your virtual emojis, virtual applauses, or any other emoji that you like. Just let's welcome them on the stage. We have Zoe, Darren, and Amito. I'll just briefly introduce each of them and give them a couple of minutes to share why they're here. And I'll start with Zoe. She is Alchemy Learning Director, Strategist in Change, Performance and Learning. And Zoe is well known for her human-centered approach, which I hope she will be sharing with us today. Hi, Zoe.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Yeah, just tell us a little about your work and why you think talking about metrics is important.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, first of all, to the organizers and hosts, and also to everybody for making the time for some PD, professional development. I know it's always really hard to, we always tell other people they should do it, right? But it's harder to do it for ourselves. So really appreciate everybody
Yeah.
being here. Yeah, so I think in my work, why metrics is important is because I want to know that I'm making a difference. We talk a lot in our work about how do we do learning that matters. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell for me.
Yeah.
I'm not a data geek. I'm not a tech person. But I want my work to count. I want it to matter, and to make a difference for everyone involved. So yeah, that's why it's important to me.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Zoe.
No worries.
Our next speaker is Darren Tang. He is a founder of VIP and organizational learning strategies with a vast experience across corporate consulting and education sectors. Hi, Darren. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Darren from Singapore. So I'm glad to be here today to have this conversation. Uh, as what Paulina shared, I'm actually the founder of WIP Learning and Consultant. So basically, I work with business leader, L&D professionals to help develop their workforce. And of course, very importantly, is to help them build effective learning culture that can actually help them drive innovation. And of course, very importantly, is to support their business goals. Then, okay, I think this topic on matrix is actually very close to my heart because I strongly believe that L&D professionals play a very important role to help people and also businesses to stay relevant, especially in today's very disruptive environment. But in order to do that, they need to have a good understanding of which matrix actually matters, not just for their L&D functions, but more importantly for their different stakeholders, whether they are leaders, line managers, and even the learners as well. Yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. We are very lucky to have you today. Thank you. And our last speaker, Amito Lee. She's an L&D consultant and founder of Be Curious, and she's been curating spaces for learning, connection, and performance for more than 15 years. Welcome, Amita. Hi.
Hey, hello. Thank you, Paulina, and thank you everyone for coming. So I am based in Hong Kong, and I actually start my career in L&D back in 2011, so 14 years ago. And so I have been working as an external training provider for the first 10 years. And then so one question that kept coming both from the clients and L&D professional and also people around me has been how do we measure training ROI and how do we measure training impact? And as a newbie back then, I was asking around and then see anyone could answer these questions. And unfortunately, not many people have answered this question for me. And a couple of people dropped mentioned that, oh, in theory, it could be measured, but in reality, it's difficult. And then this question kept coming back to my mind until last year, I started to come across something which I will be sharing later that I think would be quite useful because it is measurable, but it's not in theory. It's in practical sense, how do we work with non-L&D? So this year, I've also tried to bridge the gap between L&D because we do have a lot of jargons and language that we use, and sometimes non-L&D could be difficult to communicate with us. So as L&D, we need to learn how do we communicate better with different users. So I'm very excited to be working with Zoe and Darren today to have a chat and so that we could share our experiences and also some challenges as well. So I'm also encourage everyone here to chat. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Amita. I'm looking forward to learn from you as well. Yeah, okay. So this is the plan for today's session. We have still a little bit more than 1 hour. We'll do a little warming up activity. Then we'll move on to panel discussion, and then we also have a little Q&A session. So let's start with warming up. We like to say that this community is yours. That's why it's very important for us to shape this space together with you. So we want to ask you to drop in the chat what challenge or question you have around L&D metrics, or simply what you'd love to learn about today. We'll have about 1 minute for that, and then we'll collect all of your questions and we'll try to address them as we go. So think about what brought you here today. And yeah, any challenges that you face in your work as L&D professional. Okay, we're starting to get some questions. Thank you so much. Oh, there are a lot of interesting questions to discuss. I guess we'll have that conversation about linking business metrics, I mean, L&D metrics to business metrics or business results, because that's really a huge one. And many teams, in fact, trying to figure that one out. How to make it intangible, how to make intangible tangible. That's another good one. Standard widespread metrics. Awesome. Yeah. Great questions, guys. Thank you so much. If you have, if you don't have your question at the moment, or if, today's panel or someone else's questions will trigger any more questions for you, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on them. Okay. All right. I'm not sharing. I'm sharing, but I'm not sharing. Okay. So let's move on to our panel. I'll stop sharing my screen. Did I stop? You don't see it anymore, right? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for the great questions. I feel like all of them relevant, and because the group is not that big, we are pretty much good to cover all of them. But I would love us to start with some basics, I guess, with something simple, because in L&D, we sometimes get lost in our own language. For example, when we say engagement, we may mean attendance or completion rates, but for the business, it might mean sales or anything else. So when you hear the word metrics, what does it actually mean to you? Like, what do you think about? Do you think about data? Do you think about engagement? Do you think about impact or anything else? I'll guess it would be great to hear all of your perspectives, just, to to have different different views on this matter. So anyone want to start, please feel free.
I think Darren just unmute. Darren, you want to go first?
Oh,
Okay.
You go, Ami.
So when
Yeah,
I
you
hear
go.
like mattress, it would be breaking down the behavior and then how does it bridge between the business results and then the behavior. So when I actually was like looking at the chat, like how do we translate L&D metrics to business results? Actually, it's a reverse way. We need to understand what kind of business impact the stakeholder wants first before we think about the L&D metrics. So I think that's something from me. So what about Zoe and Darren?
okay, maybe I can add on to that. So I think when we talk about matrix, I think the first question is whose matrix is that? Because as L&D, we tend to, like what Paulina mentioned, right? Engagement, completion rate, satisfaction, how many pass the assessment and things like that. But if we think from the perspective from different stakeholders, for instance, if I'm a line manager, I wouldn't be too much concerned about those metrics, right? I'll probably be more concerned about whether, hey, are my guys able to perform better, faster, make less mistakes? Are they able to collaborate better and things like that? And of course, if I'm a business leader, then it will be a different set of metrics. For instance, financial metrics. Is my profit going up? Is my sales going up? Are we trying ways to reduce costs for the business? How about market share and things like that? Contract renewal, customer satisfaction rating, and things like that. So that could be something completely different from what L&Ds are looking at when we talk about matrix. Yeah, so but if you look at it, actually all these different matrix, they are interrelated in that sense, because when learners actually are committed to the learning and the learning experience actually suits their needs, then of course they are more committed to learn, they are more willing to apply what they have learned back into their work. And that actually drives performance. And of course, when performance improves, then obviously the business outcome will be supported in that sense. Yep. So that's my take on matrix. Thank you.
I loved how you, yeah, thank you, Darren. I loved how you say that it's important to start with whose metrics is it? It is. Yeah, it's a good one. Zoe, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought I'd stick with the alphabetical order on this one. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with my fellow panelists. And I think when I was thinking about this question, for me, what do metrics mean to me? They really mean alignment and purpose. So because it's a really great, because often I think we think about the metrics afterwards. So how we're going to measure what happens afterwards. But for me, it really begins right back at the beginning, as Amita was saying, and Darren as well, of yeah, what is this for? And you know, sometimes it's that the correlation, the causation can be easier to see, you know, when it's something like maybe sales training or using a new tech platform or a new process. And sometimes it can be really hard if it's a more you know, something that seems more intangible, like leadership development, right? Which is a space that I work in a lot as well. So, but at the end of the day, for me, it's all about how aligned are we on the purpose of this L&D intervention, and yeah, that's what it's all about, and the impact that we're trying to create together. And I think the challenges come, and the lack of influence that L&D can sometimes feel comes when we haven't had that upfront alignment and purpose about what are we really trying to achieve together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really important. And I hear like the common theme is that it's like it's not about deciding what we're gonna measure at the end, but to just to make a step back and think about this impact and purpose, and like what we really want from this learning intervention to change. So moving to the next question, like, are they like, which metrics do you normally use? Because there are so many of them. Like, I don't expect you to list all of them, but maybe there are some key metrics that you use more often or that are more meaningful than the others, just based on your experience. Or maybe there are some metrics that the business wants, but it's not really, that meaningful. Yeah, Zoe, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think I'm going to give the classic consultant answer, which is it depends.
Yeah, love it.
I think, and I don't know, I shared that I'm going to choir practice after this. So maybe I'm just like thinking too much about music. But if I share this in the chat, I'm probably showing my age here as well. But can anyone tell me what that's from?
Sound of Music.
Yep, The Sound of Music.
Oh.
And the Let's Start from the very beginning, one of the classic songs from The Sound of Music, where she says, when we read, we begin with A, B, C. When we sing, we begin with Do, Re, Mi. And I think, like for me, it always goes all the way back to the beginning of asking, like, what problem are we trying to solve? How are we going to know if this is going to be successful? So what things could we see, like that behavior that Amito mentioned, right? What are the things that we could see people doing differently? What would we hear? Sometimes I do an exercise with people of, using all the senses, right? What would we see, hear, feel? Taste is often a challenging one. But that why now? Who cares? Why is this a thing that we're trying to change? Because often people can come and say, hey, we want the communication training. And
a classic
when you start to dig a bit deeper, the classic communication, when you start to dig a bit deeper, actually communication is not the real issue or the real problem that you're trying to solve. There's something else. And also to challenge ourselves as L&D is there really an L&D intervention that's needed? Sometimes it's something else. And so, yeah, my classic consultant answer to that question would be, it depends. I think actually, to be very blunt, like I've actually stopped a partnership with a client because I was subcontracted to design a program, and we actually stopped our partnership because we had a very big misalignment around metrics. So they were very, very focused on what I call the happy sheets. So how happy were the people after the session? And knowing about cognitive load theory, and knowing that often if we make people think, there's a cognitive load there. In the moment, people might not actually feel happy because learning new things takes cognitive effort. But I'm more interested to know, in 2 weeks' time, in 1 month's time, have they changed their behavior? And we had many, many conversations about this, but their internal KPIs were, what's the score out of 10 at the end of the session? And so we just couldn't find a way through that. And so that's why I think also for me, it's about alignment and purpose. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I'm curious what the other panelists think.
Thank you for sharing, Zoe.
I think Zoe mentioned it very perfectly. And I do have one model that I think a lot of you have heard of it. It's called Kirkpatrick. And I think it's a classic model. And because I'm sharing my screen right now. So because some of you might have heard of it, and just to make an alignment, a lot of so there's 4 levels of in Kirkpatrick's measure evaluation and training. So level 1 is reaction, how happy the participants are, how engaging this is relevant, and level 2 is what is they think the skill they learned in the knowledge is applicable, the skill they have learned, what are the attitude towards the training, and also something new that adding to the model is how confident they are to apply these knowledge, skills, and the new mindset and the commitment. And level 3 is the critical behavior, and level 4 is the result. And I want to show you one statistic. And so this is what a lot of the organization measuring. Level 1, 88%, and 83% level 2. So what Paulina mentioned as well, happy sheet. And so he mentioned about the client stopping working with the client who only measured that part. But and then 60% measure level 3 and only 35% measure level 4. But this is from L&D's perspective. But if we ask the stakeholders, business owners, the percentage actually reversed. They want us to spend most of the time measuring level 3 and 4 rather than level 1 and 2. So I think this is something for like sum up what Zoe mentioned as well. And I think this is another question that I think is good to ask is whether that particular project is, because some project we could stay at level 1 and 2 measurements. Not every project needs to measure level 3 and 4. But if we were to select project that we want to invest our time and resources, because it would need quite a lot of work and resources and input and data collections. So these are some questions that feel free to take a screenshot, whether that project or initiative actually has potential impact on the organizations. Second question is, does the senior executive have interest, whether they're interested in the initiative or not? And is there any support or sponsorship from the senior executives? And then we'll look at the feasibilities, whether that will be reinforced, whether the data available or there's no data available yet, so we need to start collecting it. Are we still be able to work with the participants, or is it just one-off and we cannot follow up? Because right now, when we collect evaluations, it's like, okay, after training, how happy they are, how much learning they have. But in reality, what we want to measure in the training is how, after we collect the evaluation, we want to know how we could improve the follow-up afterwards. So this is a checklist that I think is very useful, that I'm recently taking a course that they're okay for me to share this material. And I just want to share that, and maybe see Zoe and Darren could have some input as well. But my thought is whether we need to determine whether that project is what kind of matrix, that what level are we want to go deep into. Maybe just for one communication training, there's no need to measure level 3 and 4 because it's not critical for the organizations. So let's maybe hear from Zoe and Darren.
Yeah, I think Amito really hit the nail. I think in Singapore context, most of us also use Kirkpatrick model. And coming back to Paulina's question, if I have to choose one, I'll probably choose the level 3, because if level 3 proves to be effective, I think there's a higher chance of achieving level 4 outcomes. And it also proves that probably level 1 and 2 are successful. Yeah, so it's more like a sandwich, right, between, you know, the L&D matrix and the business matrix. So if I really have to choose, I'll probably choose that level 3, which is pertaining to performance and behavioral change. Yeah. Then of course, I think I saw one question, right? Do you have example of level 3, level 4? Depends, but how do we turn Kirkpatrick model into? Yes. So I think very importantly during the conversation with business leaders or line managers is for us to understand how do they actually measure success. So for instance, if you're talking to a retail store manager and he's looking at getting the retail associates to be able to sell better, okay, not just sell products, but maybe cross-selling, upselling, and things like that, then they should be able to let you know what does success look like to them. And probably you can consider whichever is relevant matrix that is applicable to them when it comes to designing the learning experiences. And of course, when I talk about learning experiences, I'm not just talking about training. It could be e-learning, it can be blended, it can be workplace learning as well. Yes. So I think, yep. So coming back, I think if I have to choose, I will choose performance. But again, depends on what is relevant to the line manager. It's very difficult for L&D to decide for them in this case. So similar to Joey, right? It depends.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it's really interesting. And I'm wondering, like, okay, when it comes to sales, it's more or less like easy to measure. But when it comes again to our favorite classic example of communication training or something similar around soft skills, like how would you measure the the value that your learning solution brings to the business? Yes, Zoe?
Oh, sorry. I think Darren and
Yeah.
I unmuted at the same time. Yeah, I think for me, it's all about that upfront exploration and understanding, like Darren was saying as well. It's that those questions about, well, if sometimes I ask depending on the client, right? You have to adapt, but if I could have a magic wand and solve this problem for you right now, how would you know? If overnight we solved this problem and you walked into the office tomorrow or the factory or your team's meetings, what would be different? And sometimes I joke, what if we had the security cameras on you 24/7? Maybe some workplaces have that already, but what would we see? Like, how would we know that this communication problem is fixed? And kind of starting it there and putting it in a very tangible way, even when it's a soft skill, there are impacts that has, right? Or there wouldn't be some a pain point that the business is feeling. Sometimes also there's a great book called Switch by the Heath brothers, Chip and Dan. And they talk about this strategy of looking for bright spots. So are there any teams in the business where there's great communication, where you would say they don't need to do the training, for example, right? Are there any pockets, even if it's one team, even if it's one shift, where this thing isn't an issue? Let's go and understand, what are they doing differently? How could we learn from a bright spot as well? So I think for me, it's about really unpacking and understanding that context and turning it, thinking about it as much in behaviors, like Amido was saying, that really can then help give you the sense of what are you going to measure? What could you measure that will be giving you those indications? And sometimes I think, like, I work a lot, as I said, also with like things that are more intangible, like leadership development. And I think that was somebody's question. Often in those cases, I think when you think about level 3, when I think about the Kirkpatrick model, sometimes in those cases, it's about understanding rather than measuring outcome, what's a process we could measure? So what are the steps or the habits or the behaviors that we could measure, rather than, oh, now they're all this kind of leader, but think about, so if, for example, if every leader was having a one-on-one with their team members once a week, then we know that would be a big contributor to this bigger performance goal that we have. Or I think about it for my own health goals, right? Rather than thinking about, the final measurements, it's like, oh, if I'm going to focus on, did I do some kind of physical activity every day? So kind of thinking about like the process type measurements as well is another thing that can help when it's a particularly like intangible kind of topic.
It makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Zoe. If you guys have any more like precise examples of that, I think that would be really relevant. I know that some of the projects might be confidential, but if you can share any case of how you measured something, I think that would be useful.
I saw my Marianne asked the question about examples of level 3 and 4 matrix. So I do have a document but I don't want to scare people because it's the reason why we brought up the checklist of the mission critical is because there are a lot of things to measure. So, but if you want examples, I could share
Yes,
that.
please. We are ready.
From level 4 to level 3, like all the way from level 4 to level 1. Like for example, for the company, so they want to, of course, as a business, they want to measure the revenue, sales volume, customer satisfaction, and where do they get it from these documents. And then level 3, so these are the expectations from the stakeholders after some interviews, and there will be indicators where they could get these information, some from external, sales volume could be external, customer rating from internal and external sites, brand perception. Like these are things to align with the stakeholders. But then when we design the programs, we go to level 3. So as Darren mentioned, so level 4 is the result. But what we need to design and monitor is actually level 3. What kind of behavior that we want the people, like the participants, involved in the project and initiative. For example, one of the behavior is for the sales supervisor to conduct performance meetings, and then how we track them is through attendance, how often, the slide deck they will be sharing, they need to conduct bi-weekly coaching meetings. That's the behavior. And how do we measure it? Again, the attendance, the log, and what would be the actions outcome from the meeting, like the need to report back, and intervention plan. So some of the behavior. And then for the behavior to happen, we need to have drivers to push that behavior. So besides just the workshop, there are a lot of other things that we need to do in order to push for that behavior. For example, automated email, job aims, micro-learning to reinforce it, and to encourage it, we need to do certain behavior, how to reward it. So this is the structure way, and hopefully not too scary, but
No, it's
these
not.
are the model
It's really
answers.
useful.
But yeah, in reality, the key is like really having good relationship with their stakeholders. If they don't trust us and they don't want to do work themselves as well, because it's not just L&D's work. We need them to work with us, so that the behavior would need to come from the stakeholders. As Zoe mentioned, like ask them, what does the success look like? What do you see? Instead of us telling them, okay, you will see this happens. Well, tell me, what do you want to see? We could give examples, but you need to tell us.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with that, Amido. And I think, like just one example that came to mind, Paulina, you were asking for an example. So one client that I worked with in the retail space, they wanted to improve the customer service, the customer experience. And we did a really great discovery, or, upfront, we did the do-re-mi with them. We're like, okay, let's start from the beginning. It was very much why this change? Why are you investing in this right now? Because if you imagine the cost to a retail business that has 6,500 employees, and all of them need to go through a 2-hour workshop, and they need to be paid for that time. So forget about, the millions that I charge, just kidding. Forget about, hiring any consultant, just the fees for their people to be in that training is so expensive, right? So we kind of took a bit of a different approach and tried to understand, okay, like, why is this happening now? Why are you willing to invest this time of everybody? And they really wanted to have a shift in the way they approach the customer experience. And they, fortunately, is a client that also, believes in understanding what's happening in such a big network. And we actually drilled it down to one behavior. We realized that if they could get their staff to approach customer and offer them service, then people bought more things. I mean, that was the kind of cornerstone behavior that we really wanted to encourage. And that seems ridiculously simple, right? But it's a store that has a lot of different products, and often the staff members who are casual, who aren't experts, in that product, in those products, they feel a bit like, oh, if I ask someone for help, if I ask someone if they want help, I might not know what the answer is. And so they thought it was easier to just avoid the customer, right? So, so we had to understand like what were the barriers. So like Amita was saying, like the bridge, right? So what are the barriers? Why aren't they doing this behavior right now? But you know, a very long story short, we were fortunate to be able to work with this client and design their customer experience over 5 years. So we got that, which is like the consultant's dream, right? You get to see some kind of longer term impact for the work that you're doing. But they were very clear that the thing they were going to measure was there was a voice of customer. Was the customer approached? Did a team member approach the customer in the store and offer them help? That was the measurement of the success. And so over the 5 years, we were able to change the training, kept the same like basic steps for them, but changed the training depending on what new tech they had available, what was the overall business strategy at that time. And over the 5 years, they were able to take their customer service score from 32 to 76 and maintain it. So not just like, because often what can happen is there's like a peak, a peak like after training, but then it just kind of goes back to normal. But they were able to sustain that improvement over 5 years. And so they've like literally set the new benchmark for themselves. And I think another thing that was really key in that though is that we had their store managers deliver the training. So it was someone who understood the context, who understood the people, who could give the training. And the other consequence of that is that we had to keep it simple. These weren't professional facilitators delivering this program. And I think that's another like insight for me thinking about this topic is as L&D, and I'm very guilty of this as well. We always try to put too much content in, but a blessing in disguise of forcing yourself to take content out is that it makes the measurement so much easier and you can be much more clearer on what difference did we make. Were we able to shift that, if you know, that 20-80 principle, right? If we could shift this 20%, they would have this 80% impact. And that often takes a lot of work up front. And I think often clients can be very, let's get going. Like, what's the training? Show me the slides. But I think if we can encourage them to have some patience, and so that, you know, they know that we really want to make sure that this really makes a big difference, then we can find like, what are those 1 to 3 things that we're going to aim to shift. And then you've got more, you can show more of those level 3, like Amita was saying, and I think have more bang for their buck, so to speak. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great example. Thank you so much, Zoe, and a very impressive results of the outcome of the training. And from what I'm hearing is 2 important things that first of all, well, metrics by like its definition sound very like analytical thing to work with, but in practice I feel like it's a very creative space actually, because you can't just take one metric and put it in each learning decision. You have to work around together with the business and figure out sometimes a very creative solution on what actually we should measure. And another thing, which I think all of you are sharing today, that it is so important to have really great relationships and conversation with the people you're working with. I mean, the business. Yeah, because you can't do it alone, right? Darren, do you have anything to add? Any cool and funny examples, or maybe bad examples when something was measured, I don't know, wrong?
I think
Anything?
Darren, during our prep call, you mentioned, because Darren was used to work in like the operation and business unit as well. So there's some perception of working with L&D team that might be good for sharing as well.
well, I think probably I use this analogy of L&D as a doctor, because many a times line manager or business leader come to us and say, hey, we need this training. Usually we will try to ask them, oh, why? Because usually there will be many different underlying reasons behind poor performance, poor business results. And what Joey mentioned is a very good example, because some of the basis of asking for training, right, is that actually from your analysis, you know that probably training is not required. Like for instance, I always ask them, okay, if you are saying that your people are not performing up to your expectation, so then let's take one step back. At the first place, do they know what is your expectation? So if you are expecting them to perform, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, whatever, then at the first place, do you align your expectation with them? Because many a times as ops people, right? I mean, I came from ops background. We expect people come on board. Okay, this is what we do. Okay, go. But we didn't really align the expectation. So we thought that, hey, this guy is experienced. How come he can't perform his role so well? But if we take one step back, sometimes you may realize that actually there's a gap in terms of expectation, because you expect them to deliver the result, but you didn't tell them clearly what is the criteria and what are the steps needed to achieve those outcomes that you expect of them. So I think it's like a doctor. You go to a dentist, right, and say, hey, I got toothache, can you give me Panadol? So if you are L&D just providing training, right, you are just like a dentist just issuing Panadols to them because someone got a toothache. But if you deep dive into it, you may realize that, hey, this person does not have good oral hygiene, doesn't brush teeth too frequently, like to eat sweet stuff, doesn't floss the teeth. There are many underlying reasons behind the toothache, right? So yeah, so I thought this analogy, hopefully it helps. When people approach L&D as L&D professional, I think we can put on the thinking hat as a doctor and really find out what is the underlying reasons behind their problems that they initiated the conversation with L&D. I hope that helps.
It does. Yeah, thank you so much. I love the analogy with Panadol, and I think that's another big challenge in L&D when business just comes and asks for another training. And I had the same situation just yesterday when they just wanted to design a training on digital literacy. But then when we dig deeper, we found out that they don't need that training a lot at all. They just need to communicate with the people and just talk to them and explain the procedure and just have a conversation with the people. That's all. No training needed. And sometimes business doesn't like that answer. But I guess maybe we could slowly move to this part with you today, guys, about how to speak with business, how to present your results, how to because also sometimes business leaders, they are very busy people, and sometimes they have only 15 minutes for the work that needs hours. So how do you present your results in a way that is meaningful and that helps you to get the buy-in, but at the same time doesn't take ages?
Yeah, actually that fits. I just shared some example of questions in the chat that are from an ex-colleague of mine, Arun Pradhan. And they're just different way, really practical, different ways that you could start to have those conversations with your client or internal or external about like the why of this. And obviously you have to adapt to their style and what they're going to be, how they like to communicate. But I think it's essentially, because like you said, Polina, you don't want to appear unhelpful. You don't want it to come across like, oh, I don't want to do any work. But it's more like, hey, help me help you achieve your goals. Like, help me understand, what problem, what change you want to see. Like, what's the from to, if you had to have that, that change that you're looking at, what do you get measured on, right? Like, what is your boss looking at when they're looking at your performance? And, that saying of like, what interests my boss fascinates me. A little bit like that, and understanding the world from their lens. And I love this collection of examples that Aaron's put together of different ways that you could ask that. And I think, yeah, like we were saying, right, sometimes it's there's more simple trainings or L&D interventions that we do. Sometimes it's more complex and it's more strategic. And, you know, another like way that we look at that, another question I would ask the business, is to try to understand, you know, is it a skills gap? So, you know, people know what they should do, but you've had that alignment of expectations, like Darren said, but they haven't had the chance to practice it in a safe space and where they can make mistakes and it's not going to cost customers or something. So there's some kind of skills gap. Is it a knowledge gap? So maybe you haven't had that alignment of expectations, or they don't know where the information is, or they don't know how the new system works. Or is it a mindset attitude gap? You know, is it more about how they think about that topic, how they see themselves? I mean, one program that we designed was around the initial brief was a rostering program. Like the client had like implemented a new rostering platform, like tech platform. And at first they treated it like a knowledge problem. And so they just taught everyone, here's how you work on the system. Didn't work. And then they thought, oh no, it's a skills problem. So it's just about practicing. Didn't work. And often people come to see us when other things haven't worked, and it's like we needed something different. But what we realized was it was a lot around mindset, because people saw rostering as an admin task. They didn't see it as a business lever. They didn't see it as a thing that could help get their store better results. And so it was a lot about changing their mindset about that particular topic, because the actual buttons, that part was fairly easy. It was more about the mindset around it. So I think, you know, that having that conversation can also be helpful, can point you in the right direction of what kind of L&D intervention it is. Like Darren was saying, like, is it more knowledge is it a checklist? Is it a full immersion? Is it a coaching? Is it just a skills lab? Yeah, so I think some of those kind of unpacking that with the client as well can be helpful. And sometimes, you know, I think like Darren was saying as well, we need to talk to multiple stakeholders to try to get the full picture. But yeah, I'm curious what Amito might think.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also I'm just thinking, because I was looking at the chat on the question we have from Ruby about like how to measure whether the training program is truly useful. And like one question that we actually need to ask is whether we believe that that training is useful for what and for who. Because a lot of time training is not useful, honestly. Like, and yeah, to be like very blunt, and it's not useful. But how do we design a training that is useful? We don't just focus on the training design itself on the day. We focus on before and after. And this is something that I think from my observation from the past 14 years in the industry, I am a victim, and also I'm guilty of that as well, for like spending 132% of my time and resources on training design, on what happens on the training day. And actually, I have been ignoring the complexity of what makes training really work. It's not just about training design, what happens on the day. And so that really brings one thing is when do we measure the evaluation? That's one, because I'm not selling this program, but I'm taking the course, and I think some of the content is quite useful. That's why I'm just sharing some of the content. So it brought me like thinking as well. So when do we measure the training, evaluate, when do we do the evaluations? And so during the session would be checking in with the participants, but oftentimes we do it immediately right after, like at the end of the session. But actually there could be a lot of different way and timing to measure it. It could be sometime after. Like for example, one of my trainer, So if we measure it right after the training happens, because that training is very complex and it's mind draining and is quite painful, honestly, to go through that training itself. So at the end of the session, like people would not be very happy. And like people would be like reacting with like, oh, I'm so tired, and then so many things. But if we measure it 2 weeks after the training, if we know that that's what happens, then we know what the result is, not how happy they are, but how have they applied the skills or tools that learned during that session. Many would have replied yes, but if we measure it right after the training, I think like, yeah, as Zoe mentioned, like heavy cognitive load, like I don't think I applied it, but from our experience, if we measure it like later, it's more accurate measurement. So the time, we also need to consider the timing of when do we measure it and why do we measure it at certain time. So something that inspired me as well. And so I just want to share that.
That's really great. Yeah, thank you for sharing those slides. I think it's even easier to see things when you see things. Sorry for for my language. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Darren? Do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, I think what Amito mentioned is at the later part, right? After the intervention and then you do the evaluation. But I thought at the very beginning of the process, during the early stage where they come to you with a problem, it's good that during that point of time to really understand is that what the success looks like to them, not just for the leaders, but also the line manager. And of course, L&D, right? They have their own KPI as well. So I've actually prepared a questionnaire, which I thought will be helpful. Maybe, let me see if I can share it. Hope you all can see my screen. So I think Paulina can help to send to the participants after today's session if it's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will send it to you.
Yeah, this is what I call the performance consulting questionnaire. So there are basically 4 key aspects, which actually ties in very nicely with the Kirkpatrick. So of course, Kirkpatrick, we know the top layer will be the results, right? The outcome. So this business actually relates to that. So some of the questions, I think Paulina mentioned about leaders having very short time to talk to you about what are some of the challenges. So very quickly, some of the questions that you can ask them during a, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes kind of conversation, if it's possible, you know, very quickly understand from them, find out from them what are their main business objectives, what challenges are they facing, how are all these affecting the company, the results, the employee, the stakeholders, what are some of the issues that could be stopping them from achieving the objectives. And then beyond training, what other interventions will be helpful to achieve the goals? How do they measure the success of the training or any other interventions? Some of it could be non-learning related interventions. And then of course, besides training, what else needs to be done to help address the challenge itself? Then of course, this one move to level 2 of the Kirkpatrick performance. So some of the question, what is the current performance level? What performance level do you want to achieve for your team? What are the performance gap? How do you measure the gaps? And of course, the performance. Who needs to attend the training or be involved in the intervention? The environment. How does the environment actually affect their performance? Resource constraint that might limit performance. And then learning will be, this is similar to Kirkpatrick level 2, right? What do they currently know? What else do they need to know or do? What skills will help them perform? What support at the workplace would help them apply what they have learned? When should the training or intervention take place? What methods work or not work before for the group itself? And then, of course, understanding about the learners. So what are their profile, roles, experience, education? What previous training have they attended in this area? How do they prefer to learn the different modality of learning? The learning activities they enjoy, their motivation level. I think this is very important as well. Then of course, in terms of their context, are they working at different location? What's their working hours? Are they on shift and things like that? And then whether they are comfortable working with technology. So these are some questions that I thought would be helpful during the early stage of the conversation with your different stakeholders for you to find out, to do a diagnosis in that sense. What actually are the root cause, preferences, and things that will actually help leads to identifying relevant matrix, not just for L&D, but also for managers and business leaders as well. Yep.
Thanks for sharing, Darren. And we'll have this document and we will send it to all our participants after the panel. I really love how structured everything is. I guess it really helps, to keep everything in one document and just not to invent the wheel each time. Yeah, so we still have a little bit of time. So I was just wondering, are there any tools that help you, like if you have access to, I don't know, any tools that help you to track metrics? Do you have any favorite? There was also, I think, similar questions about AI. So if you can share anything around that'd be great.
My favorites are the ones that the organization already uses. So whatever systems the team or the organization already uses to track these things that are important to it, then that's the one. I think you're going to have much more success, particularly when, as Amito showed, right? Like often the real impact we can't see straight away. So I've always had more success when it's using something that they already do to measure. I mean, maybe if it's in a startup space, I think someone mentioned they're in the startup, maybe those things haven't been, there's not a lot of that already, perhaps. So yeah, something that can integrate as much as possible with people's daily routines and rhythms. And, that would be another kind of thought is, how can the behaviors that you're trying to change or shift, the new ones, how could they be integrated into the weekly, daily routines, rhythms that are already there? And I think then have a bigger chance of success of happening. And, there's also, I think there's a lot of power in stories as well, how storytelling can also be a way of measuring impact in a more qualitative way. But yeah, that's like I said, I'm not a tech LMS data geek person.
No, that's
so
fine.
My go-to is always what they're already using.
Yeah, that's fine, and it sounds fair, especially if you work with multiple organizations. And I'm just trying to figure, because like in my organizations we don't measure anything. I'm trying to figure out like what tools do you actually use? Okay, there is a dashboard in LMS, but it doesn't show the impact it has on the business. So I'm thinking more of the methodologies. If you can share. I'm hearing stories, could be one of those, having conversations. Anything else?
I've came across some platform, but I haven't used it before. But the first thing that we do is don't worry about the platform yet. Gather the data using Excel spreadsheet is fine. The easiest way to collect, and I think it's important for L&D to manage our own brand within the organization, that people see us as useful and credible, and also minimum effort or input from them, because they expect us to do the work, but at the same time we need to lure them in order for them to engage them, so that they partner with us. Don't just throw the work to L&D team and make us do all the work that they should be doing. And so I don't worry too much about the platform and how it displays. It's about whether they think the data we collect is useful and whether we'll make use of that data to improve the performance. And the rest is just whether we use PowerPoint, whether we use storytelling, whether we use video, whether we use testimonials. There's so many different ways that we could share what we do, but what information is important for the stakeholders that they want to see.
Right.
If they want to see something, and even Excel spreadsheet would do.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you approach it, Darren?
Yeah, I think of the data collection may require the stakeholders' involvement. So for instance, some of the data collected could be through performance review during their annual performance review where they measure certain behaviors. Some of it could be through observations. So let's say a store manager who is observing the staff after they have attended certain learning experiences. Then they probably have to observe, when the work is ongoing on the ground. And then from there, they can actually share their feedback, whether that intervention is suitable or could they suspect that there could be other issues that need to be resolved. So for instance, you may have trained them so well to sell and all these things, but you realize that, hey, they are still not selling well. Why is that so? It could be related to your reward system, your reward and recognition system. So if they are selling better, but they do not have the incentive, they do not have the recognition, whether financial or non-financial recognition, then probably that's not motivating them to perform better. So there are many reasons, and some of this data collection probably needs the support of different stakeholders, to help gather all this data so that we can do further analysis post intervention.
So I'm hearing that, again, depending on the metrics we are to track, there is, again, a lot of space for creativity to think beyond dashboards on how we can kind of see that metric or that result in practice. Zoe,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just building on Darren's point. I think what he mentioned, like sometimes it's not about a learning intervention. Sometimes L&D is, part of the puzzle. And so that, that kind of little formula of the skills, knowledge, attitude, and then environment can include those things, right? Like, I've been involved in programs before where, early on in my career where we focused so much on the skills and knowledge and we didn't realize that actually back in the workplace, the behaviors we were the reward and recognition system was the opposite of the behaviors that we were trying to train them. So people aren't stupid. They're like, well, if I just keep doing it the old way, I'm going to get a bonus. So it was like, we were trying to promote collaboration and collective approach, and all the reward and recognition systems are all just based on individual output. So you're just going to doesn't matter how amazing your program is, right? So I think assessing those things up front, and like Darren said, like the stakeholders need to be involved in that, I think. But I was just thinking, like, when there's no measurement around, and sometimes, that can be in different industries a challenge, I would go really back to your purpose. Like, why do we exist? And how do we, and I totally agree as well with Amita, like it can be in a spreadsheet, it doesn't matter, but having that also is then gonna, I think, guide your decisions, like having those meaningful outcomes, and then knowing, okay, what would that look like, and just kind of seeing what you can notice. Like, I don't think it's about measuring for measuring sake, but it's like, how are you going to use that information? Is there like a feedback loop, is that going to somehow nourish the system in some way, like to move forward, I guess?
Yeah, and that's actually another interesting question on how you're going to use that data that we discussed just recently with the team. I think that could be our last question if anyone has no questions at all at this point, and we can then wrap up.
I did just want to share one resource
Yeah.
that I just put the link in the chat, but I can share, which I know that Icarus is familiar with. But just when we were talking about, you know, how can we think about the right time? Sorry, I'm scrolling through here. How can we think about the right timing for measuring something? And I think, you know, this idea of
wow.
learning arches is a really nice way of being able to visualize the journey that people might be going on. And so I just put the link there. You can download this for free, but we work with these, and I think see these. So this is like the start of a semester in a course. But you notice that there's these arches coming in. So it's recognizing that people are landing from somewhere else. They're not just like a sort of vacuum, right? Like people arrive into a space with previous experiences. You know, like those questions that Darren was asking, like their attitudes to learning, to tech, to this topic. So I'd always really encourage you to be able to speak to at least a handful of other people as well as just the manager to really get a sense of what's going on. But I think the arches, I just really find them helpful to think of, you know, the work that I'm doing in a bigger context and a journey, and what might be happening before and afterwards to try to plan those like key moments for measurement, for the follow-up, for like a nudge of the email, like Amita was sharing before. Yeah, just really helpful. And Icarus has a really great article about that maybe she has the link she can
really
share.
Great. Yeah, we'll definitely share with the participants after the panel. Thanks so much, Zoe, for sharing. Just checking in if anyone has any more questions for us to cover. I feel like we discussed a lot today and that it's been a very productive discussion. A lot of resources shared and links and tools that I personally eager to use from tomorrow when I come back to work. If anyone has a final question that you want to get an answer from our speakers, please feel free. Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, I'll guess if there are no more questions, we'll just wrap up. And I'm gonna share my screen one more final time. Okay, here you go. Can you see it? Okay, awesome. So, just a final step. If you guys could share one tip on how to approach metrics in one sentence, to finalize everything that we spoke about, that'd be great. And for those of you in the chat, if you can also share in the meantime one insight to take away or one tool you learned, one I don't know, idea that really stuck with you, please feel free. And I'll let Darren share his tip now.
Yes, one tip in one sentence, right? I think understand what are important to your stakeholders. Yeah, one
Love
sentence.
it.
Yeah, so
Love it. Thanks, Darren. Yeah.
This supports that.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Amita, Zoe.
Yep, I'll go next. So I remember our topic for today's panel is, are your metrics telling the right story? And for me, instead of asking what matters, is actually asking what matters. What matters? Like, what matters? if it doesn't matter, it doesn't require metrics at all. And so the key question is what matters for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks. Yeah. Zoe, your final word.
Yeah, I'm sending lots of heart bombs for what Darren and Amito said. I think for me is it's that we need both. I think maybe when we think about metrics, we think of like a microscope or a magnifying glass, and I think there's a place for that, but it's down the track. I think maybe first we need the binoculars so we can zoom out and get like a bigger picture of like what success is like,
Yeah.
what's the context, what's really important here. So we need to have both binoculars and a magnifying
And a
glass,
microscope.
and a microscope, as L&D to really make the metrics meaningful,
Yeah.
and that's mine.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I can see that this is like we all speak about the same thing but from different angles. And I guess the key topic is actually to speak with the business and have a conversation and make it a collaborative experience to actually make it work. And people are sharing some interesting insights in the chat as well. Thank you so much. Start with what business wants to achieve. Remember the purpose. Inside, it always depends on the context, which is so true. Sarah is sharing that she loves all the resources that you guys shared. Thank you so much for that once again, and we'll be sharing them in our emails. Again, we need to maintain good communications with business leaders. It's important to understand what they consider to be successful results. Talk to your stakeholders to find out what success looks like. It looks like a lot of valuable insights. And again, thank you so much for such a rich conversation. I feel like there is really a lot to digest in a good way, and oops. Why I can't move? Or maybe I'll just stop sharing and oops. Okay. So we have a QR code where we really love your feedback because again, this is a shared space and our goal is to make it as much practical and relevant for you as you wish. So please, if you have a minute to fill out our short feedback form, we would be really grateful to you. We'll be also sending this one in the email tomorrow, or if you want to chat with us, feel free. We're always happy to hear what you think. And if you're still not in our community, please join the L&D Shakers group on LinkedIn. There is a QR code for that. And if you're there, just let's keep the conversation going. We will be sharing some insights on LinkedIn and also in our Slack group. So if you have anything to share, please tag us and we'll be cheering you up everywhere. And I guess that's it. Let me just close. Yeah, thank you so much to our beautiful speakers. Again, I'm sending you all the emojis I have. It's been really great to have this conversation with all of you. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you all of you who joined us from different parts of the world. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
Hostess with the mostess.
I have
Was
to
a
remember that one.
It was an awesome conversation. It was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you
Mm.
all.